Welcome to the Sleep Paralysis tapes. Settle into the dark, pull the covers close, and let the heavy silence fill your room. Tonight, we descend into chilling tales of the unexplained. Before the screen fades to pitch black, I invite you to become part of this archive. If you have your own terrifying encounters, please contact me and I will narrate your story in a future tape. If these shadows bring you comfort, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Now, close your eyes. Do not look at the foot of your bed. Just listen and let us begin. Let me tell you about the cold, not the kind you complain about, the kind that's a physical fact. It steals your breath and makes your bones ache. It was January 2023 and a polar vortex had parked itself over Toronto. The wind chill was pushing -40. The air didn't just feel cold. It felt hostile. David was a fourth-year geology student, a practical man. He thought in maps and mineral hardness. He believed that if you understood the structure of a thing, you understood the thing itself. He'd just finished a late session with a stubborn rock sample. His apartment was a 20-minute walk away. In that weather, a 20-minute walk was a genuine risk. Now, the University of Toronto has a solution for this. Under the campus, there's a network of steam tunnels. They carry pipes for heat and water between buildings. Officially, they're a utility corridor. For students in winter, they're a subterranean highway. David knew them well. He'd used them for years. They were bureaucratic, mapped, and utterly boring. That's what you need to understand. They were boring. The walls were beige concrete. The pipes were wrapped in silver insulation. The gates that led into them were heavy steel doors, each with a number stenciled in black. Gate 1, Gate 4, Gate 7. They went up to Gate 12. That was the entire system, 12 gates. It was all in the campus facilities guide, the one nobody reads. On that night, with the wind screaming outside, the choice was simple. He could brave the vortex, or he could take the 5-minute tunnel walk. A normal act. A rational decision on an abnormally cold night. He packed his bag, shrugged on his parka, and headed down. The stairwell was warmer. The hum of machinery grew louder. The air smelled of dust and heated metal. He pushed through a heavy door into the tunnel access corridor. It was a small, square room, and on the far wall there was the gate. It was Gate 9. Solid steel door with a push bar. Next to it, a faded map showed the entire tunnel network in simple lines. Gates 1 through 12. David didn't even look at it. He pushed the bar. The door opened with a familiar, heavy sigh. Warm, dry air washed over him. The tunnel stretched ahead, lit by long fluorescent tubes. The silver pipes ran along the ceiling, ticking softly. He started walking. His boots echoed on the concrete floor. This was the utility of warmth. A simple, engineered solution. He was thinking about his rock sample, about his thesis. He was not thinking about the tunnels. They were a means to an end, a known quantity. He passed the branch to Gate 10. He passed a small, chained-off alcove. Everything was exactly as it should be. This is the last moment where everything was normal, where the world made its old, comfortable sense. David was just a student, cold, taking a shortcut home. I tell you all this about the mapped gates and the rational decision for a reason. You need to hear the ordinary picture perfectly described so you can understand the one detail that, later, wouldn't fit. Because about halfway there, the lights above him flickered. Just once. It wasn't unusual. The tunnels were old. Lights flicker. But when they steadied, David saw something else on the wall ahead. Another door, set into the tunnel wall where, according to the map he knew by heart, there was only blank concrete. It was smaller than the other gates. Older. The steel was a darker rust-blotched gray, and stenciled on it in paint faded to a dirty cream color were two numbers, a 1 and a 3. Gate 13. And it was ever so slightly ajar. He stood there for a full minute just looking at it. The cold from outside was forgotten. The familiar, ticking warmth of the steam tunnel felt like a lie now. Because that door, it wasn't supposed to be there. David's mind, that logical, structured engine, tried to process it. A maintenance access? But it was labeled a gate, and the official campus map ended at 12. The door was open maybe an inch. A sliver of deeper darkness was behind it. Now, a reasonable person would have kept walking. A reasonable person would have gone home, made tea, and chalked it up to a trick of the light. David was a reasonable person. He believed in maps. But he was also a scientist, and a scientist observes. He takes notes. He investigates anomalies. He told himself that was why he did it. Later, he'd wish it was just simple, stupid curiosity. He stepped forward. The rubber toe of his boot nudged the heavy steel. It swung inward without a sound. No squeal of rusted hinges. It moved on air, smooth and raw. The air that came out was different. It wasn't the dry, metallic heat of the steam tunnels. It was cool and damp. It carried a smell, wet earth like deep clay. But underneath that, a sharp, static tang. Ozone, like after a lightning strike. He pulled out his phone and thumbed on the flashlight. The beam cut into the darkness. The tunnel beyond wasn't made of smooth, painted concrete. The walls were hand-laid brick, old and rounded, the mortar weeping a dark stain. The ceiling was a low, vaulted arch. The floor wasn't level. A shallow stream of water, clear and cold, ran down the center of the passage. It collected in grimy pools around his feet. His phone light glinted off the water's surface. The pipes were gone. The fluorescent hum was gone. The only sounds were the soft drip of water somewhere ahead, and his own breathing, which suddenly seemed too loud. He looked back. The familiar, bright tunnel of gates 1 through 12 was still there, right behind him. A beacon of the normal world. He could just step back, close the door, and go home. He took a step forward instead. Just one, to see. The brick tunnel curved gently to the left, his light unable to reach the end of the bend. And there were lights, but not the long tubes he knew. Spaced far apart, maybe every 50 feet, were single, antique, incandescent bulbs in simple metal cages. They glowed with a weak orange-yellow light, casting more shadow than illumination. They looked like they hadn't been changed since the 1950s. He walked another 10 paces. The air grew colder. The damp smell grew stronger. He could no longer hear the faint, comforting tick of the steam pipes from the main tunnel. The silence here was thick, like a blanket. It was the silence of a place that hasn't been disturbed in a very, very long time. His logical mind was screaming now. The geology was all wrong. They were on bedrock here. This wasn't a substrate for water to pool like this. The architecture was pre-war, maybe earlier. None of the campus tunnels looked like this. He checked his phone. No signal. The clock was still running, though. He'd been in here for 4 minutes. He decided to go to the next light, just to the next bulb. Then he turned back. The walk felt longer than it should have. The curve in the tunnel seemed to slowly straighten, but it never really did. It was like walking on a spiral. His sense of direction, usually so sure, began to soften. He wasn't sure if he was walking north, or east, or down. The only constant was the water trickling past his boots. He reached the next bulb. Its weak glow made the damp bricks look like old skin. He shone his light ahead. The tunnel continued, identical, fading into blackness. This was the moment, the turning point. He'd seen enough. This was a forgotten relic. It would dead-end at a brick wall, and he'd feel like a fool. He'd go back, report the door, and that would be that. He turned around and looked back the way he came. The tunnel stretched behind him, a mirror image of the way ahead. Brick, water, a single distant bulb glowing in its cage. It curved gently to the right. Or was it the left? He'd come from a straight line, hadn't he? A straight line back to Gate 13, to the modern world. A low, hollow feeling opened in his stomach. The kind you get when you're lost. He started walking back. Or what he thought was back. His boots splashed in the shallow water. The only sounds were drip, splash, and breath. After 2 minutes of walking, he should have seen the door. He didn't. He saw another bulb, another curve. The tunnel was identical in every direction. He stopped. His heart was a hard, quick drum against his ribs. He checked his phone clock. He'd been in the brick tunnel for 10 minutes total. The campus tunnel was a 5-minute walk. He'd walked straight in, he was sure of it. So walking straight back should have taken him out. It didn't. The door to gate 13 was gone. He stood there in the weak orange light. Water trickled past his boots. He looked one way down the brick tunnel, then the other. Both were identical. Both were wrong. His breath came in short, sharp clouds in the cold air. He was a geologist. He understood space and distance. This wasn't possible. He'd walked in a straight line. The door should be right there. He started to run. His boots splashed loudly in the quiet. The sound echoed off the wet bricks, coming back from all directions. He passed under one caged bulb, then another. The tunnel didn't change. It just kept curving, that gentle, endless spiral. He had no idea if he was running deeper in or back the way he came. Panic was a live wire in his chest. He skidded to a stop, hands on his knees, gasping. He fumbled for his phone. The flashlight beam danced over the walls. No signal. The clock read 11:47 p.m. He'd entered the main tunnel around 11:30. He'd been in this place for 17 minutes. He should have crossed the entire campus twice by now. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, where the tunnel curved, the darkness wasn't complete. There was a different quality to it. A gray, flat light. Not the glow of a bulb. He walked toward it, slowly now. The brick wall on his right simply ended. It opened into a large, dark room. The gray light was coming from a high, grimy window on the far wall. Streetlight filtered through decades of dirt. He wasn't in a tunnel anymore. He was in a basement. A huge, industrial basement. The air smelled of oil and old concrete. He could make out the hulking shapes of furnaces and water heaters. Pipes snaked across a ceiling, strung with unshielded fluorescent fixtures, all dark. This was a mechanical room. But not a university one. It was too big, too municipal. He saw a metal staircase leading up to a door, a red exit sign above it, unlit. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart hammering. He hit the push bar on the door. It opened onto a clean, well-lit hallway with polished floors. An office building. He could see a bank of elevators. A sign on the wall had a logo and an address. 1 Dundas Street West. His mind went blank for a second. Then it did the calculation. The University of Toronto's Earth Sciences Center was at 5 Bancroft Avenue. He knew the city grid. He knew the rock it was built on. It was nearly a mile from campus. He pushed through the next set of doors and stumbled out onto the street. The polar vortex hit him like a wall. The cold was a physical shock, but the real shock was the view. He was standing at the corner of Dundas and Yonge. The Eaton Center was right there, the huge glowing signs, the late-night traffic, the normal, freezing Toronto night. He turned and looked up at the building he'd just exited, the former Toronto Star Building, a place he'd passed 100 times, a place with no conceivable connection to the steam tunnels under his university. He started walking, then jogging, then running. The cold air earned his lungs. He didn't feel it. All he felt was a dizzy, rising nausea. The world had cracked open, and he'd fallen through. It took him 25 minutes to get back to the campus police office. He was shivering uncontrollably, his hair frozen with sweat. He babbled about Gate 13 and brick tunnels and Dundas Street. The 2 security guards on duty listened. They were professionals. They'd heard every kind of student story. This one was new. They pulled up the tunnel schematics on their computer. The head guard, a man with a kind, tired face, pointed at the screen. See? Gates 1 through 12. That's the system. There is no gate 13. There's never been a gate 13. David insisted. He begged. He described the rust, the number, the bricks. The guards exchanged a look. The kind of look that says it's a late night, a stressed student, maybe something you shouldn't have smoked. But protocol is protocol. Okay, the head guard said, sighing. Show us. So, just after 1 a.m., David led them back into the Earth Sciences Center basement, down the warm stairwell, into the speckled tile room, to gate 9. He pushed it open. The familiar fluorescent hum, the silver pipes. They walked to the spot halfway to Sidney Smith. The wall was blank, smooth, beige painted concrete. No door, no rust, no number 13. David stood there, staring at the wall. The guard stood behind him. The silence was heavy. It was the silence of being humid and of being humiliated. It was here, he whispered. The head guard put a hand on his shoulder. It wasn't unkind. Son, he said, it's been a long night. It's -40 out. The mind plays tricks. Let's get you home. They walked him back out. They didn't file a report. There was nothing to report. David went back to his apartment. He didn't sleep. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He pulled up the official campus utility maps. He zoomed in. He traced every line. Gates 1 through 12. He pulled up a city map. He measured the distance. 5 Bancroft Avenue to 1, Dundas Street West. 1.2 kilometers. As the crow flies. Through solid city blocks, buildings, foundations, subway lines. He looked at the blank, beige wall in his mind. Then he looked at the memory of the dripping brick and the caged bulbs. One of them was real. One of them was a lie. And the truly unsettling thing, the thing that kept him sitting there until the sun came up, was that he knew with a cold geological certainty that both of them were true. The weeks that followed were a kind of slow unraveling. David went to his lectures. He wrote his papers. He analyzed his rocks, but it was all happening behind a pane of thick, soundproof glass. The world had lost its solidity. He'd touch a desk or a doorknob, and part of his mind would whisper, "But is it really there?" He became obsessed with maps. Historical surveys, architectural blueprints, sewer layouts. He'd spent hours cross-referencing. He was looking for a seam, a crack, a place where the official record didn't quite match reality. He found nothing. The maps were consistent and complete. They told a story that had no room for a damp brick spiral. The anxiety was worse underground. The lecture hall in the engineering basement now felt like a trap. The hum of the ventilation became something else. He started taking the long way, always. Stairs instead of elevators. Sidewalks, no matter the cold. His sleep fractured. He'd jolt awake in the dark, convinced the trickle of water he heard was from his dream, but also not from his dream. He'd lie there, heart pounding, straining to hear it again. The silence would feel like a held breath. This is what it does to you. It doesn't show you a monster. It takes the world you trusted, the world of maps and rational conclusions, and it proves to you that it's a stage set. Then it walks off, leaving you alone. The horror isn't in what you saw, it's in everything you now can't see. His normal life felt thin and performative. He was going through the motions of being David, while the real him was still standing in that trickle of water. Then, on a Tuesday in late February, he checked his campus mailbox. Among the usual junk was a plain, legal-sized envelope. No stamp, just his name, handwritten in a precise, old-fashioned script. His blood went cold. It was the wrong kind of paper, thick and creamy. He took it back to his apartment. He didn't open it right away. He made tea, his hands shaking badly. He knew that whatever was inside was an answer, and he was terrified of answers. Finally, he sat down. He used a knife to slit the top. There was no letter, no note, just a single sheet of paper, a printout. It was a scan of a newspaper page. The layout was archaic. At the top, the masthead read, "The Varsity." The student paper. But the date was October 12, 1928. The page had ads for tailor shops and notices about debating society meetings, but near the bottom, circled in faint pencil, was a small box of text. A public notice. David's breath caught. He had to read it 3 times before he understood. It read, "Notice from the Office of the President and the Board of Governors, temporary closure. Access via Gate 13 to the auxiliary ventilation line is prohibited until further notice due to moisture instability and structural concerns. Trespassers will be prosecuted. This closure is effective immediately. All keys are to be returned to the superintendent of buildings." That was it. He sat there for a long time. His tea went cold. Temporary closure. Moisture instability. Gate 13. It was real. It had a name. It had a reason, once, for being sealed away. A bureaucratic, mundane reason. Moisture. Structure. Not monsters, not ghosts, damp bricks and bad foundations. But the words, "temporary closure," echoed in the silent apartment. Closure from 1928. How temporary was it? Did they ever fix the moisture? Did they ever reopen it? Or did they just forget? And who sent this to him? He turned the paper over. Blank. The envelope had nothing. It could have come from a historian, a facilities worker, or someone else. Someone who knew what it was like to walk the damp passage. Someone who needed him to know he wasn't crazy. That was the worst part, in a way. The confirmation. He'd almost made his peace with the idea that he'd had a psychotic break. That was a scary thought, but it was a medical thought. It had a label. This was something else. This was a receipt from the past, handed to him in the present, for a door that wasn't there. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at the table, staring at the words, Gate 13. He realized, with a slow dread, that he was no longer a geology student who'd had a weird experience. He was now the person who knew about the door. Knowing about it meant the door could now know about him. David graduated that spring. He got his degree in geology. He framed it and put it on the wall of a new apartment far from campus. He got a job with a mineral survey company. He did everything you're supposed to do. But he was a different man. He couldn't go underground. Not ever. If a client wanted a core sample review from a mine site, he'd have to pass. If a colleague suggested a shortcut through a parking garage, he'd walk the long way around in the rain. The sound of dripping water from a leaky faucet or a downspout would freeze him in place. His mouth would flood with the remembered taste of wet clay and ozone. He still loved maps, but his trust in them was broken. He'd study a survey, perfect in its lines and legends, and a cold part of his mind would whisper, "And what did they leave off? What's in the silence between the contours?" The official record showed nothing. A stressed student on a cold night. A brief, confused incident. No Gate 13. No anomalous tunnel. Case closed. There was only one piece of corroboration. One thread that kept him from believing he'd lost his mind completely. A few months after the newspaper clipping arrived, David went back to 1 Dundas Street West. Not to go inside, just to look. He stood across the street, watching people come and go from the office tower. An older man in a maintenance uniform came out for a smoke break. He looked like he'd worked there for decades. On an impulse, David crossed the street. He didn't mention Gate 13. He just said he was a student who'd gotten lost in the basement late one night in January. He described the big mechanical room and the old furnaces. The super took a long drag on his cigarette, his eyes narrowing. He said, "January? That brutal cold snap?" David nodded. "Yeah," the man said, blowing out smoke. "I remember that. Night security called me. Said some kid was down in the old boiler room babbling about tunnels. You looked like you'd seen a ghost, or fallen in a lake." He shook his head. "We figured you'd gotten in from the PATH system, gotten turned around, but you were soaked to the knees. The PATH is dry." He stamped out his cigarette. "Never did figure out how you got in. The doors from the parking garage were locked. Always are. He gave David a long, appraising look. You figure it out? David just shook his head. Yeah, the super said. Some things you don't. You'd just be glad you got out. And he went back inside. That was it. The only proof. The exit was real. The origin point was not. So, what do you do with that? You live with it. You get up, you go to work, you have a life. But underneath it all, you carry a quiet, permanent dread. Not of monsters, but of architecture. Of the spaces between the walls. You understand that the world is layered. What's on the map is just the top sheet. Beneath it, there are older drafts, mistakes, closed chapters. Gate 13 was a temporary closure in 1928 for moisture instability. They probably meant to fix it. Then the Depression hit. Then the war. Then it was just forgotten, filed away. But a closure isn't a deletion. The door was still there. The damp passage was still there, following its own set of rules. A pocket of 1928, persisting in the dark. And the clipping. Who sent it? Was it a historian, digging through microfiche, who found the notice and connected it to a campus security rumor? Was it a fellow traveler? Someone else who found the door on a different night in a different year and needed David to know he wasn't alone? Or, think about this. The notice said all keys were to be returned to the superintendent of buildings in 1928. What if one wasn't? What if a key, or the knowledge of the key, became a kind of heirloom, passed down through a line of people who knew, people who maintained the silence? And when someone stumbles through, when the door is used, they send a reminder, a receipt, a way of saying, we know you were here, now forget, or pretend to. David will never know. He lives with that too. The last time I spoke to him, he told me something. He said geology teaches you about deep time, about epochs that pass without a trace. He said, we think a building is permanent, but it's not. It's a temporary arrangement of materials. The land remembers what was there before. And sometimes the building remembers too. A different layout, a different door. He avoids Toronto now. He lives out west, where the bedrock is exposed and you can see the bones of the world right there in the open air. But sometimes, on a very cold night, when the wind is just right, he says he can still smell it. The damp earth, the ozone. And he knows, with that cold, logical certainty, that the door is still there, somewhere, waiting under a different set of rules. And it is never, ever closed. The tape has reached its end. I hope the stories tonight brought a pleasant chill to your spine as you drifted further into the dark. Thank you for braving the shadows here at the Sleep Paralysis tapes. If you are still awake, lying still in the quiet, remember to contact me with your own unsettling encounters so they can be added to our growing archive. As my voice fades away, let the silence of your room wrap around you completely. May your sleep be undisturbed, your doors remain locked, and your morning arrive safely. Until we open the tapes again, good night.